Freight vampires. How brokers bleed truckers. Dry Jake Holloway had hauled steel, produce, and even oversized generators across the country. 15 years on the road had taught him patience, grit, and how to fix a turbo with nothing but duct tape and prayer. But the one thing he couldn't fix, the thing that burned him more than any breakdown, was the middleman problem. The hidden cut shippers, the folks who needed freight moved, often paid thousands. Jake knew this. He had friends in shipping offices, heard it firsthand. A load from Dallas to Atlanta might cost the shipper $3,800. By the time it got filtered through a broker and posted on a load board, Jake would see an offer for $1,100. That missing $2,100 straight into the broker's pocket, for making a phone call, for sending an email, for doing nothing compared to what Jake did, burning fuel, wearing out tires, grinding his back across 600 miles of asphalt. Brokers justified it with slick talk. We connect shippers with carriers. We assume risk, we negotiate. But everyone in the industry knew the truth. They were middlemen parasites, siphoning half the blood out of every haul. The government shrugged. There were laws, at least on paper. Federal regulation said drivers had the right to see what the shipper paid. Transparency was supposed to protect them. But brokers wriggled out of it with the same excuse every time: proprietary information. Jake once demanded the paperwork. The broker laughed over the phone. "What are you gonna do, call the FMCSA?" Good luck, and Jake knew he was right. Enforcement was a ghost. Regulators in Washington didn't want to rattle the freight chain. As long as shelves stayed stocked, they didn't care who got squeezed. Lobbyists made sure the system stayed broken, oiling the gears with campaign money, load boards, and false hope. Load boards were supposed to be salvation, places where drivers could find their own freight, cut out the lies. But those boards, controlled by the same brokers, they flooded them with garbage rates, daring desperate drivers to take them. A rookie might see $150 a mile and jump, thinking it was decent. But fuel, insurance, maintenance, those ate more than that before the driver ever took home a dime. Experienced hands like Jake knew better. But some weeks, when bills piled up, even he had to swallow bad rates. The campfire truth. One night in Missouri, Jake sat with other drivers around a truck stop diner table. Plates of eggs and coffee mugs filled the space between them. Maria, hauling reefer, told her story. "Shipper paid $6,000 for my load of strawberries from California. Broker gave me $2,700, and I burned up in the desert with reefer fuel at $7 a gallon." Tom, another driver, slammed his mug down. "They don't haul, they don't scale. They don't sit at docks for 12 hours, but they're making more than we do on every run." Heads nodded all around. It wasn't news. It was the ugly truth of the industry. The unspoken rage truckers called it legalized theft. They joked bitterly, calling brokers freight vampires and rate thieves, or scum of the earth. But underneath the jokes was anger. Drivers knew they were the backbone of America, hauling food, medicine, and steel while brokers skimmed the cream. The rage built every time Jake filled his tanks and watched half his check vanish into the pump. Every time he handed cash to the mechanic for another blown tire. Every time he worked 70 hours in a week only to bring home less than a man punching a clock in a warehouse. And every time he thought if the government cared, they'd fix this, but they don't. The road goes on. The next morning, Jake fired up his Peterbilt, rolled back onto I-70, and set his eyes east. The bills weren't going to pay themselves. The system was rotten. Brokers were bleeding drivers. And Washington looked the other way. But the freight still had to move. And until the day things changed, truckers like Jake would keep grinding gears, burning diesel, and swallowing the bitter truth. The scum don't move America's freight. We do, by Geeks Trucking.